I should have seen it coming the moment she strutted into the airport in those sky-high stilettos for an overnight flight. It was clear this wasn't a journey we were sharing, not in any real way. The second she showed up dressed like that, I knew this trip was hers alone, and I was just a bystander in her carefully staged scene. At the gate, she leaned in and planted a quick peck on my cheek. A showy gesture meant more for onlookers than for me. She flashed a playful grin and teased, "Try not to pine for me too much, okay?" Her words dripped with that familiar charm, the kind she wielded like a prop. "Oh, I'll manage," I shot back, my tone light but pointed. For a fleeting moment, she froze, her eyes searching mine, as if my response had caught her off guard. It was the first time I'd seen her pause like that, even for a second. Then she let out a laugh, sharp and dismissive. "Man, you're such an oddball," she said, shaking her head. With that, she spun around, her heels clicking against the floor like the final notes of a song, each step echoing with a sense of closure as she boarded the private jet. As the engines roared to life, I could hear muffled laughter from inside the plane, her and her friends, gleeful about their "no guys allowed" escape, celebrating their so-called freedom. Their cackles carried through the air, a reminder of the world she'd built without me. Instead of lingering, I turned and headed straight for the commercial terminal, where I snagged a last-minute, one-way ticket to Vienna, economy class, stuck in a middle seat. With nothing but a beat-up duffel bag and a quiet resolve that had been building inside me for 3 years. I didn't need much, just enough to carry the spark that was finally ready to ignite. My flight took off just 30 minutes after hers, but by then, the letter I'd written was already in her possession, slipped carefully into the folder her assistant had packed without a second glance. She wouldn't discover it until they were well in the air, probably at cruising altitude, when she'd finally flip open the file. Inside that letter was a meticulously prepared package, a notarized copy of the asset transfer, a detailed breakdown of our joint accounts, screenshots, subpoenas, and legal documents written with the precision of a surgeon's blade. At the bottom, my signature sat, calm, deliberate, and final, marking the end of the life we'd built together. When I touched down in Vienna, my phone was already blowing up, 150 messages waiting, each one a snapshot of her unraveling. The fifth message read, "Babe, what is this?" By the 16th, she was pleading, "We were just letting off steam. Please call me." Her words were a mix of panic and excuses, each one more desperate than the last. By the time I checked into a cozy, no-frills hotel in Vienna, one with exposed brick walls and no room service, her messages had shifted through a predictable cycle: desperation, apologies, then manipulation. It was her classic playbook, one I'd seen too many times before. One message stood out: "Just talk to me, please. I'm scared." That one nearly broke me, tugging at the part of me that still remembered the good days. But fear? That was rich coming from her. She'd spent years twisting mine, using my fear of losing her, of being alone, of being replaced, like a weapon she sharpened with every silent treatment. For months before her girls' trip, I started picking up on the little clues. Receipts from places she swore she'd never visited. Invoices from a jeweler in Calverton charged to our shared account, even though she was supposedly at a board retreat in Lake Mirren. Then there were the late-night Zoom calls where she'd switch off her camera the second I walked into the room, a little too fast, a little too deliberate. The biggest red flag was so obvious I almost missed it, but I kept my cool. I played the part of the clueless guy, letting her chuckle at my worn-out hoodies and roll her eyes at my predictable habits. She thought I'd never dare step out of the perfect little world she'd crafted, where I was just a supporting character in her story. But while she was busy posting curated selfies with her high-powered friends, I was quietly getting my ducks in a row. I met with lawyers, moved money into new accounts, and collected timestamps like pieces of a puzzle. I even brought in an old college friend who specialized in digital forensics. He uncovered everything: emails she thought she'd deleted, messages, calendars that didn't line up. Her monthly massages turned out to be a recurring appointment under the alias Elias for Cute. James, it turned out, was a strategic consultant at her firm, older, married, and far too cozy with her for my liking. By the time she gave me that performative kiss at the airport, I'd already closed 5 accounts, transferred my half of our investment properties into an LLC she couldn't access, and finalized a backup residency application in Italy. I was done playing her game. The next day, I wandered through Vienna, letting my phone buzz in my pocket like an angry wasp I refused to acknowledge. I stopped by the Vienna Cultural Archive, staring at statues that had outlasted lives far older than hers. History has a way of putting things in perspective, reminding you that some stories are just fleeting. That evening, I finally sent her a single reply. You're not scared of losing me. You're scared I'm already gone. Then I powered off my phone, ordered a drink, and watched the snow drift down on a city full of strangers who didn't know my name. She boarded her plane thinking I was a broken man, but I was already soaring, just in a different direction. It took 3 days for the silence to get to her. For me, though, I was thriving, sleeping soundly, breathing easier. It's amazing how light you feel when you let go of someone who thought they were holding you up. Then her assistant called, the same woman who used to smirk when I'd drop off lunch at the office or send flowers just because. The one who called me, the soft one, behind my back. Her voice was shaky, like she'd seen something unsettling. Hi. I wasn't sure if I should call, but she's not herself. Sipping an espresso on a quiet Verona street corner, I leaned back and said, she rarely is. My voice was calm, almost amused, as I let the moment linger. The assistant hesitated, then spilled it all. She hasn't left the hotel suite in 3 days. She's ignoring work emails. There was an incident. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to go on. She threw her phone across the room, then her laptop. She's crying, not her usual dramatic tears, but real panic. Did something happen? I let a small grin creep across my face as I ended the call. Truth has a way of catching up, doesn't it? The assistant's words hung in the air, but I was already moving forward, leaving the chaos behind like a storm I'd outrun. This wasn't about vengeance, it was about clarity. I didn't hack into her accounts or make a scene at some fancy restaurant. I didn't leak her secrets to her board or splash screenshots across the internet. That would have just handed her the starring role in a drama she'd scripted herself, casting her as the victim. Instead, I walked away, taking with me everything she'd relied on, every piece of the life she thought she controlled. I left her with nothing but the realization that I wasn't the prop she'd made me out to be in her carefully curated world. The next morning, my lawyer pinged me with an update. She demanded an emergency mediation hearing. She still didn't get it, still thought she could charm or argue her way back into the driver's seat. She'd always seen emotions as pawns, guilt was a bargaining chip, love was just another form of payment, and I was the fool she could keep withdrawing from. What she forgot, though, was that I was the one who'd taught her the game. I showed her how to command a room, how to read people's tells, how to negotiate like a pro. I prepped her for investor pitches, rehearsed merger scenarios, even polished her Vision Summit speech on empathy as corporate currency. Every move she made, she'd learned by watching me, and now I was using those same skills to build a new life without her. While she was blowing up my phone, pleading for, just 10 minutes, I'll do anything, I was sitting down with a Verona-based firm. They were diving into sustainable logistics and needed a consultant who knew both US and EU systems inside out. They offered me a 2-year contract, complete with a paid apartment, no strings attached. It's funny how much easier it is to start fresh when you've already survived the wreckage of something you thought would last forever. Meanwhile, her perfect image was starting to crack. Whispers from her board began to leak, emails surfaced, thanks to the digital trail my college buddy had dug up. Turns out, Elias Vorn, her strategic consultant, wasn't just cozying up to her. He'd been dipping into several company pots, racking up HR complaints, ethics violations, and texts so cringe-worthy they even made me wince. She was tangled up in it all, and it was messy. It wouldn't tank her company, not yet, but it was the kind of scandal that leaves a mark. Investors start asking questions when they see bruises like that, the kind you can't hide with a tailored blazer or a slick press release. Her carefully built empire was wobbling, and I could almost hear the murmurs from across the ocean. Then came the voice memo. Her voice broke as she spoke, raw and unsteady. I don't care about the money, or the firm, or what people say. I never thought you'd actually leave. I thought you'd always be there, like you always were. I don't even know who I am without you. It was the kind of confession that might have pulled me back once, but now it just sounded like a script she didn't know how to rewrite. By the end of the week, the whispers had made it to Global Pulse Network, not the screaming headline she dreaded, but a subtle piece about corporate misconduct and emerging concerns around executive transparency. Industry speak for troubles brewing. She wasn't named outright, but the timing was no coincidence. Neither was the anonymous quote from a source close to the board, hinting that the CEO's recent personal crisis might be affecting her performance. That was my doing, a favor called in from an old logistics contact who'd moved into media risk consulting. He owed me one, and I collected. Of course, she made it worse. That's what people like her do. They scramble to fix one problem and end up creating 3 more. Her Instagram went silent. No more stage brunches or rooftop selfies. Her LinkedIn switched to private mode. She canceled the rest of her girls' trip and chartered a jet back home, alone. Same jet, same runway, but this time, there was no laughter, just the quiet hum of consequences waiting for her. Meanwhile, I was settling into my new place in Solve District, waking up each morning without that familiar knot in my chest. No phone exploding with her demands about dinner plans or investor calls, no side-eye over my choice of cereal. Life felt simple for the first time in years. On the 6th day, her lawyer reached out to mine with a proposal, not a threat or an accusation, just a restructuring suggestion to speed up the dissolution process. Translation: she wanted the penthouse, the Range Rover, and her company shares. In return, she offered me the Nevada property and a one-time cash settlement, calling it a gesture of goodwill. I almost laughed out loud. She still thought this was a deal she could negotiate. I didn't want the penthouse. I'd already moved every asset with my name on it into a trust she couldn't touch. She hadn't bothered to read the fine print of the prenup she'd insisted I sign years ago, back when she was so sure I'd never have the spine to use it. She forgot I was the one who helped her draft it, walking her through every clause, every condition. Now, that same document was my shield and my sword. That night, she tried to FaceTime me, probably thinking a few tears could do what her lawyers couldn't. I didn't pick up. Instead, I sent her a photo, me at a cozy Verena cafe, my laptop open, a sleek hardcover notebook beside it. The caption read, "Built this world while you were performing in yours." No smirk, no jab, just the truth. That's what she never grasped. I wasn't playing her game anymore. She put on a show, but I crafted an exit strategy. When she left me standing at the airport, thinking she was proving her power, all she really did was hand me my freedom. I didn't realize how heavy her world had been until I stepped out of it. And let me tell you, there's nothing like the peace of living without needing someone else to validate your existence. That first week in Verena, I spent a lot of time just being still. No deadlines, no roles to play, just the soft rhythm of a city that didn't know my name and didn't care to. It was the kind of anonymity I hadn't known I was starving for, a quiet that let me breathe without the weight of expectations. Back home, I was always defined by someone else, her husband, her support system, her shadow in the background. I was the guy who booked her flights, proofread her press releases, and stood off stage while she soaked up the applause. She was the star. I was the framework holding her up, invisible but essential. Here in Verena, though, I wasn't anybody's anything, and that blank slate meant I could finally start figuring out who I wanted to be. The firm I signed with gave me a desk in a converted warehouse, with huge windows that let sunlight spill in like it was washing away the past. My job was straightforward: consult on their international logistics, help them shape something they couldn't yet see. Turns out, I'm good at spotting patterns before they form, building systems that work without needing to be flashy. I dove into the work, not to run from anything, but to create something tangible, real impact, measurable results, systems that didn't care about my wardrobe or my table manners at a gala. Slowly, the chaos settled, not just around her drama, but around me. I was finding my footing, piece by piece. One day, maybe 2 weeks after I arrived, I caught my reflection in a train window. The guy staring back wasn't the tired man I used to know. He wasn't waiting for someone else's approval or bracing for the next crisis. He'd been through a storm, sure, but he was on the other side now, and he looked steady. That night, I wandered past a record shop and heard a song drifting out, an old jazz tune she used to scoff at, calling it disorganized noise. I always loved it, though, the way it danced without a predictable pattern, making sense in its own wild way. It felt like the life I wanted now, not perfect, but free. I stepped inside and bought the record, a small act of reclaiming something I'd let her take from me. Meanwhile, she kept reaching out, emails, texts, even a message from a burner number, written like some stranger offering sage advice. Nice try, but I knew her too well. Her words always had a rhythm, a calculated cadence, even in her apologies. Even her pain felt staged, like she was directing her own tragedy. But real grief? It's supposed to be raw, messy, shattering. Hers was just another performance. Then the news broke, for days later, a headline about her stepping down as CEO amid an ethics investigation. The article was polished, citing personal stress and a pivot to private life, but buried in the fine print was the truth: weeks of scrutiny over hidden conflicts of interest and a subtle shakeup in leadership. In plain English, she was out. The board had turned, investors got nervous, and her empire started to crumble. The real triumph wasn't her fall. It was waking up every day without needing her approval. The next morning, I sat on my building's rooftop, notebook in hand, watching Verena hum with life. It wasn't some poetic metaphor. It was just the world moving forward, honest and unconcerned. I scribbled down ideas for a platform I'd been mulling over, something sustainable, efficient, built from the ground up. It was the kind of project I'd never had room for when I was busy propping up her ambitions. She once told me I was too stable, like it was a weakness. What she didn't see was that guys like me are the foundation, and when you push us too far, we don't just walk away. We rebuild, stronger, smarter, better. It's wild how fast you can piece together a new life when you stop trying to patch up the old one. For the first time in years, I wasn't molding myself to fit someone else's definition of success. No more fundraising galas where I had to plaster on a fake grin. No more boardroom chatter that felt like chewing glass. No more champagne I didn't want in glasses I didn't choose. Just mornings, good, solid mornings where I could think, really think. And thinking? It's dangerous when you've spent years being used for your reliability, your quiet, your convenience. You start remembering who you were before her, and you start imagining who you could be after. Those thoughts turned into action fast. I started sketching out a side project, a logistics optimization tool for small and mid-sized companies that needed real-time accuracy without the bloated price tag of enterprise software. The Verena firm got wind of it, and, instead of shutting it down, they offered to fund it. No strings, no controlling stake, just a small incubator fund and a contract that let me walk if I wanted. Trust, respect, space, man, I'd forgotten what those felt like. I called the project Beacon Path, a nod to finding my way again, to reclaiming the direction I'd lost for too long. Back in the States, she tried to spin her downfall as a choice. I saw the Forbes article, a fluffy piece clearly pinned by her PR team, calling it a sabbatical for reflection and growth. Sure, except sabbaticals don't usually follow a board voting you out or your scandal-tainted sidekick quietly stepping down from advisory roles. But let her have her story, her sunset posts, her soul-searching sound bites. I was done speaking her language. One night, I went to dinner with some colleagues, and one of them, Leora, a sharp, quiet project lead, asked what brought me to Verena. Her gaze was steady, curious, not prying. For the first time in forever, I didn't sugarcoat it. My wife left me at the airport, I said. Instead of chasing her, I bought a one-way ticket here. I was done with that world. She nodded, raised her glass, and said, to better architecture. I smiled. She wasn't talking about buildings. Walking home through Verena's quiet streets, past bakeries shutting down and bookstores dimming their lights, I passed an old man with a three-legged dog. No flash, no noise, just life. That's what healing feels like, I realized. It's not one big moment, it's 100 small ones. It's ignoring her 192th message, not checking if she unfollowed me, feeling someone smile, and knowing you're not a burden anymore. Then her letter arrived, thick cream paper, her perfect handwriting, no return address, just my name like she still had a claim. Inside were 5 pages of crafted emotion, not truth, she didn't know how to do truth. Just strategic vulnerability, her trademark. I missed the sound of you typing in the next room. I haven't slept since you left. What we built mattered. You mattered. At the end, let's rebuild together. We can fix this. She even tucked in a photo from our anniversary 4 years ago, her head tilted just so, my arm around her, a smile that, looking back, was never real. She thought that photo would pull me back. It did stir something, but not what she wanted, relief. The man in that picture was gone, buried somewhere over the Atlantic, replaced by someone who finally knew his worth. She didn't stop. A few days later, a call came from an unknown number. I let it ring, then another, then a voicemail. Her voice was low, controlled. If you think you can walk away from everything we built without consequences, think again. There it was, the real her, the CEO of emotional warfare. She pivoted mid-message, tossing out accusations about mishandled funds during our divorce prep, claiming her lawyers were re-evaluating everything. I almost laughed. I'd kept every receipt, every timestamp, every signed document. I knew the prenup better than her legal team did. I'd helped write it. So I sent one reply. Check your own statements before tossing around threats. Last I checked, using company funds for hotel suites and jewelry for your consultant doesn't sit well with the SEC. Take care. 3 hours later, her lawyer contacted mine. Suddenly, all reevaluations were dropped. A miscommunication, they called it. A misunderstanding. Sure, she'd rolled the dice and lost. And I was already building something new, something hers couldn't touch.